We are part of a unique regiment.
We train hard to do a special role.
They're the regiment the army loves to hate.
The Paras and the Marines have always been the first choice when it comes to Special Forces support group, but, two squads seem to be outperforming them.
Ask any squaddy, they'll give you a sneer or a joke about babysitting airfields. So what's the truth? Are they real soldiers? Do they deserve the stick? Or are they in fact a very important part of Britain's military?
Maybe you've got what it takes to be an RAF Regiment gunner.
So what is the RAF Regiment? What's the unit's history and what's their role now? That's what we're looking at today. Before we march into history, let's deal with the elephant in the room, or should I say the rock ape. The RAF Regiment doesn't fit neatly in the army box. They wear RAF blue berets but carry rifles like infantry. They guard airfields, which sounds dull compared to charging hills or dropping into Arnhem. Then there's the legendary nickname. In Aden 1952, an officer mistook his mate for a baboon and allegedly shot him. The story spread like wildfire and rock apes has stuck ever since. So yes, easy to mock, but harder to explain why these same men ended up fighting desperate battles from North Africa to Afghanistan. Let's rewind the clock. The island of Crete, German paratroopers drop in, seize Malemi airfield and the RAF lose it practically intact. Why? Because the army hadn't been able to guard it properly. Winston Churchill was furious. His answer, fine, we'll have our own regiment. If the army can't defend airfields, the RAF bloody well will. So on the 1st of February 1942, by royal warrant, the RAF Regiment was born. 66,000 men organised into squadrons of gunners and light anti-aircraft troops. Their job, seize, secure and defend airfields at any cost. Cue eye-rolling, of course, from the army, but Churchill had just given birth to an important force, and one that would fight from North Africa to Burma. Their first test, Operation Torch 1942. RAF Regiment squadrons push ahead to secure airstrips for the advancing Allies. One squadron, 2721, had to drag radar gear across the desert on camels when their vehicles bogged down. Imagine it, RAF lads in khaki leading camels like some biblical caravan just to get a radar working. Not glamorous, but damn essential. And when push came to shove at Medjez al-Bab in 1943, those same gunners turned captured 25-pounders on German tanks at under a kilometre's range, point blank. These airfield babysitters were fighting like artillerymen. As it says on this website, they also continuously patrolled no man's land and retrieved a number of downed RAF and US Air Force airmen, an early example of CSAR. The squadron was transferred to 2nd Infantry Brigade on the 3rd of May, and between 6th to 12th of May was part of S-Force, an Air Force intelligence group that located and secured enemy equipment and personnel in the Bizerta and Tunis areas. Important work. So I just want to say to anyone who's served or is serving in the RAF Regiment, my sincere apologies. I'm not sure of the correct terminology that you use, and I'm sure I've made mistakes. For example, I don't know if the numbers are read as 2968 Field Squadron or 2968 Field Squadron, for example, so you'll have to bear with me if I make a few mistakes. RAF is not my specialty, but I do want to do you guys some justice. Okay, September 1943, the Greek island of Kos. 2909 Squadron, barely trained, never even test-fired their anti-aircraft gun, is sent to defend Antimachia airfield. Every day, Stukas and Messerschmitts hammer their position. Every night, more bombs, more casualties. By October, German paratroopers and Brandenburg Special Forces descend. The RAF Regiment fight on until their ammo's gone. Then they destroy their own guns and retreat into the hills. When they finally surrendered, just 5 men out of 124 were still alive and unwounded. Yeah, you can laugh at the rock apes all you like, but nobody on Kos was laughing. Then we've got Italy, 1944, and 2721 Squadron went one better. During the breakout from Anzio in June 1944, their commander, Squadron Leader Leslie McMichael, led his men into Rome. Their job, seize the radio station and airfield. They did, and became the first British unit to enter Rome ahead of everyone else. For his trouble, McMichael won the American Bronze Star, and became the regiment's most decorated officer. Not a bad day at the office, that. And there was no time to rest. As it says on the RAF Regiment Heritage Centre, the squadron was transferred in September back to the eastern side of Italy, serving with 10 Corps of the 8th Army. It operated in the line with units ranging from the Indian Army, Household Cavalry and Canadian Armour. It had a reputation for robust professionalism and elan, demonstrated in a series of contacts and patrol activities during the advance towards Ravenna, particularly in the assault and capture of the impressively fortified German stronghold in the sugar factory at Classe Fiore, just south of Ravenna. The action saw members of the squadron win an MC and 3 military medals, as well as numerous mentioned in dispatches. And after almost 12 continuous months, the squadron was relieved after taking Ravenna in December by 2788 Squadron. Latterly, some members of the squadron were engaged in special operations with the SBS in the Aegean Sea and Yugoslavia as part of Celi or Celi Force, I'm not sure. And then Burma, the Battle of Mektila. RAF Regiment gunners fly in to hold the airfield, knowing the Japanese will throw everything at them. This is from the RAF Benevolent Fund website. It says, it was at Mektila East Airfield that the RAF Regiment established D-Box. The 2 runways could not be held at night and the Japanese would move in under darkness and establish themselves on the airstrip. It was the job of the gunners of the RAF Regiment to go out each hot, humid, dusty morning and clear the airstrips of the enemy parties before the first supply, casualty, evacuation and fighter aircraft could land. Yo, what a tough fight. Wing Commander Bill Lander was the officer commanding 1307 Wing HQ RAF Regiment, and it was his responsibility to coordinate the actions of all the different RAF Regiment, squadrons and flights. There's a lot more detail in the article, so have a look. Now it says here, Lander had arrived at the airstrip by air with the first flights of the RAF Regiment. He was to be a constant source of inspiring leadership throughout the siege. Despite the airfield being under incessant shelling and subject to night attacks by Japanese jitter parties, Lander took a grip of the situation and deployed his flights, often leading night patrols or the daily forays out onto the strip. Brave man. Unfortunately, while leading a patrol on the 24th of March, he and his runner, leading aircraftman Dakers, were killed by sniper fire. While there was no shortage of regiment volunteers to bring in his and Dakers' bodies, it was 4 days before they could be recovered. This battle alone should silence the jokes. It won't, of course, but it should. In Europe, the regiment grew huge, over 80,000 men. That's more than the entire British Army now. They guarded airfields from France to Holland, even downing Germany's new wonder weapon. In November 1944, an RAF Regiment Bofors crew shot down a Messerschmitt 262 jet out of the sky, which I believe was the first ground kill of a jet in history. Nice work, lads. And in May 1945, a detachment led by squadron leader Mark Hobden captured none other than Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, Hitler's successor. From airfield defence to nabbing the head of Nazi Germany, not bad for babysitters. As an aside, Donitz's Kriegsmarine flag, which was removed from his HQ, can be seen at the RAF Regiment Heritage Centre at RAF Honington, a place I'd love to visit actually. I bet that's a cracking day out. Right, before we crack on with Aden, the Falklands and Iraq, a quick word from the legends at Osprey Publishing, who are kindly keeping this channel in tea, biscuits and reference books. Now look, I'll be honest, I'm not really an RAF or aviation guy, as I'm sure you're aware. I'm a boots on the ground, mud up to the knees sort of historian. But for those of you who love the roar of engines, trace of fire and aircraft doing improbable things in impossible places, Osprey have options, lots of options. And as we're heading towards Christmas, I thought it was well worth helping you with the annual ritual of finding what our loved ones actually want. And obviously Osprey Books makes a cracking gift, just saying. Today I'll focus on recent and upcoming books with an aviation theme from Osprey's Air Campaign series. Right, first up is this belter, South Atlantic 1982, the carrier campaign in the Falklands War. Naval expert Angus Constam offers a fascinating history of naval aviation during that conflict. The superbly manoeuvrable Harriers provided air cover during the ferociously contested landings, and he explains how the British forces achieved their impressive Falklands air-to-air record, shooting down 21 Argentinian jets for no losses. And then a brand new one available now for pre-order, The Hump, 1942-45, America's first massive military airlift by Mark Lardas, illustrated by Graham Turner. This is the story of the utterly bonkers, utterly dangerous airlift over the Himalayas, The Hump. Flying supplies from India into China in piston engine transports. They had to avoid Japanese fighters, aircraft falling out of the sky. But by 1945 it had become a vast organised air armada, the first successful strategic airlift in history, and the blueprint for those that followed, including Berlin. It's got fantastic artwork, the maps are great, and for aviation buffs it's an absolute treat. And did you know Osprey books can be bought as audiobooks on Audible and Spotify, and they're available on the Kindle. I've just brought 2 Kindle editions myself as prep for an upcoming filming trip to Kenya. Okay, first up is King's African Rifles Soldier versus Schutztrupp Soldier, East Africa 1917-18. That's from the Combat series. And the East Africa Campaign 1914-18, von Lettow Vorbeck's masterpiece. That's part of the Campaign series. Both are brilliant reads if you're into guerrilla warfare, colonial troops and ambushes in the bush. The artwork's cracking and the research is spot on. So whether you want aviation, East African bush campaigns or Luftwaffe last stands, hit the links in the description and pick up something from Osprey. They support the channel and they've been keeping history buffs happy for over 50 years now. They've also got a Black Friday sale on until the 7th of December, so make sure you check that out. Now, after 1945, the regiment was everywhere Britain went. Palestine, Malaya, Aden, Cyprus, training colonial levies, guarding radar sites and occasionally getting ambushed in dusty alleyways. It was in Aden that the Rock Ape nickname stuck, as we mentioned earlier. From then on, every squaddy had ammunition to mock them. In the 1970s, the regiment took on Rapier surface-to-air missiles guarding NATO bases in Germany. In 1982, they deployed with the Falklands Task Force, setting up Rapiers at San Carlos Bay to keep Argentine jets off the beachhead. The official RAF line is that they downed at least one aircraft. Unofficially, they scared off many more. As this RAF post on Facebook says, 6th Squadron were part of 5 Brigade and provided ground-based air defence with their Rapier missile systems to help protect the bridgehead at San Carlos, as well as the Royal Naval Fleet, Royal Marines and Army personnel positioned there. 6th or 63 Squadron were the longest serving ground unit in the Falklands War, staying on well after the Argentine defeat to continue to provide GBAD of the airfield at Stanley from Black Eagle Camp named after the squadron crest. Fast forward to the 1990s and 2000s. The regiment was there in the Gulf War, Bosnia, Kosovo, Sierra Leone. Then of course came Iraq and Afghanistan. In Basra, regiment squadrons patrolled outside the wire, took casualties in mortar attacks and fought firefights with insurgents. They did similar work in Afghanistan. 5 men were killed in Iraq and the same number in Afghan, dozens injured, proof that the regiment wasn't just standing around in sentry boxes. Now, I was out in Bastion not long after the so-called Battle of Bastion. I don't know a lot about it, but I know the RAF Regiment got a lot of stick. I suspect the army enjoyed laying it on a bit thick, any excuse to give them some grief. But they obviously did fight hard that day because, as I found in this article from the Herald, Sergeant Roy Geddes received the Military Cross for his actions that day and Corporal Kurt Lee was mentioned in dispatches. It goes on to say Sergeant Roy Geddes, 43, is only the second member of the RAF to receive the honour for action in Afghanistan. The married father of 3 was called into action in September last year to repel the attack on Camp Bastion, during which Prince Harry was moved to a guarded location. Today the RAF Regiment's small, just under 2,000 regulars, but their job is just as vital as ever. They're the UK's experts in airfield defence. They also have a detachment attached to the Special Forces Support Group, not a job that anyone can do. I remember seeing a group of lads from the RAF Regiment at a motorway services rather randomly one day. Very impressive looking group of blokes because they had both para wings and they had the all arms commando flash too, the badge for that. So I figured they were SFSG and they looked pretty impressive dudes. So while researching for this film, I spoke to a mate of mine, a mate of a mate, who served both in an Army Infantry Regiment and the RAF Regiment, and he sent me some voice notes sort of laying out what he thought the differences were. He said, first off, yes, the RAF Regiment aren't officially, quote-unquote frontline infantry in the way a unit like the Rifles or other line battalions were fighting in Helmand. And that's exactly why the Army traditionally takes the piss, because they don't really understand what the regiment actually does. But according to him, that stereotype is miles out of date. He points out that the RAF Regiment has massively modernised and diversified far faster than many traditional infantry units. In fact, and this is his opinion, not mine, he reckons they're now more capable than the majority of standard infantry regiments and sit just behind the Paras and Royal Marines in terms of professionalism and adaptability. Don't get angry, don't shoot me. He goes on to say the regiment isn't just for, airfield defence, walking around behind the wire. They actually have handled light armoured reconnaissance roles, airborne tasks, air defence, there's field squadrons, they were specialists in NBC, nuclear, biological and chemical warfare. They're a real Swiss Army knife of capabilities all rolled into one. And as he points out, that's the reason they've recently been sent out to Belgium to help with anti-drone defences out there, because they're at the forefront of that technology. And then finally, the other thing he said, which was really interesting, and please do comment if you think this is nonsense, is that the RAF Regiment does treat their lads a bit better, gives them a bit more leeway, treats them like grown-ups, assumes that they're mature, the accommodation's better, food's better, fewer petty rules, that sort of thing. Anyway, like I said, don't shoot the messenger. Let me know what you think in the comments, but definitely some food for thought.
We are the RAF Regiment!
But don't get us wrong.
So, the regiment everyone loves to hate. Yeah, probably. But here's the truth. Air power wins wars, and air power only works if the airfields are secure. That's the RAF regiment's job. They fight on the ground so the planes can fight even in the sky. Mock them if you like, they don't care. They've been through adversity since the day Churchill ordered them into existence. After all, their motto is per ardua, through adversity. They're the Rock Apes, they're the RAF regiment. Okay, if you enjoyed this dive into the history of the regiment everyone loves to hate, hit subscribe and join me next time as we uncover more forgotten stories of Britain's military past. Comment and let me know which units you'd like me to talk about, and in the meantime, watch the video that's on screen now. I think you're going to like it.